everyone, my name is Ryan Cam, and welcome back to my road to Deadpool and Wolverine. With Deadpool and Wolverine coming out in theaters this weekend, I'm speedrunning through the remainder of the 20th Century Fox X-Men films. Starting off, well, not starting off, but continuing with genuinely a movie that is just a it's a bit of an odd duck. It's X-Men Apocalypse. This was directed once again by Bryan Singer and was his last involvement in anything X-Men related for the rest of his life, essentially. This is the first solo X-Men film of what I'm going to be calling the young X-Men cast, James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender and all of them. The older crew, they are not involved in this, with the exception of one cameo, which I'll talk about in a second. And this is the one that I don't want to say broke the franchise, but broke the franchise while that led to the final killing of it. Through a series of events, an ancient god that is simply known as Apocalypse, played by Oscar Isaacs, comes back around and, well, wants to create the apocalypse. In his own words, everything they built will fall, and from the ashes of our world, we will build a better one. He assembles a team, his four horsemen of the apocalypse, one of which is Magneto, reprised by Michael Fassbender. He has since settled down into a family life, but his family is then taken away, and, well, like the Emperor once did for Darth Vader, basically said, search your feelings, you know it to be true, takes him to Auschwitz, says, I need that Magneto back. And well, that Magneto comes back, much to the chagrin of Professor X, who has just started up the Xavier School for Gifted Youngsters, and a new class including Storm, who is one of the Four Horsemen but becomes an X-Men later, and including a young Alex Summers, not Scott Summers weirdly, and Dr. Jean Grey. 2016 was a loaded year for comic book movies, from DC and Marvel. You got Batman v Superman, Suicide Squad, Captain America Civil War, Deadpool, like I talked about just the other day, and I'm probably missing a big one. 2016 was a big year for superhero movies, and sandwiched right in the middle there is X-Men Apocalypse, the one that is like, eh, when you bring it up to most people. To be perfectly honest, I've had kind of a meh relationship with this movie over the years, and rewatching clips for it, I can confirm that when people talk about X-Men The Last Stand being the wild and crazy one with too many plot lines that I've seen in some reviews, I respectfully say, no, X-Men Apocalypse is the one you're talking about. The biggest problem with this movie is that there is so much stuff going on. Apocalypse and all of his stuff, Magneto and his family, which, why did they give him a family? I will never understand. The whole thing with the school, Dr. Jean Grey slowly becoming into Dark Phoenix because it is cosmic law somewhere that Simon Kinberg must do a Dark Phoenix movie, and it completely sucks, but we'll talk about that later. Stryker and his crew show up randomly to take the mutants in, only to stumble right into a Wolverine cameo, which is arguably one of the best cameos in X-Men history and was suitably badass, but at the same time, you're just like, okay, interesting. Just needed to focus up. That is the big problem with the movie, and there's genuinely some very good things here. James McAvoy is good as Professor X. Michael Fassbender is great as Wolverine. As Magneto, excuse me. Most of the performances are really good. Jennifer Lawrence is there, but I feel like this movie has a big case of what I'm going to be calling the Spider-Man 3 theory. Just cram a bunch of comic book stuff in there related to, in this case, the X-Men, and say, hey, people will go and see it, right? Well, yeah, people went and see it, but people have eyes and a memory. And if you have not seen anything X-Men related since the first X-Men movie, I feel like if you watch this movie completely blind, you will be totally lost. And like I said, there's interesting things to be had here. Magneto stuff, for example. Professor X being used as a pawn by Apocalypse. That could have been interesting, but it just is smothered by things that are just there for the sake of we must have this in an X-Men movie, or else is it truly an X-Men movie? You're never going to see me mad at Hugh Jackman being Wolverine in anything. Yes, even that. But his involvement there is just to say, hey, you remember Wolverine? Like, yeah, he's only the most famous X-Men ever. And the thing is, kind of similar to The Last Stand, there are a bunch of new mutants that are introduced, like Storm, for example, that are given next to nothing to do, really. This movie is so busy that at the end of the movie, in the end credits scene, it teases a very well-known X-Men villain in the form of Mr. Sinister. That never happens, but it is teased. This movie, like I said, is just way too busy. But I don't really hate this movie. I've read a review from Birth Movies Death that called this movie the franchise killer. No, this did not kill the franchise. It didn't do it no favors, especially with all the goodwill built up over Days of Future Past and Deadpool, but it certainly didn't kill the franchise. That was a little movie called Dark Phoenix, and oh, we're gonna get to that. The movie is mostly good acting, good action sequences. Overall, I'm gonna give this movie a good rating. I don't know how controversial that's going to be, but for what for good chunks of it, I was enjoying myself. This is far from a perfect movie. It's got a lot of problems, but when the movie does hit, it really hits. It is the definition of a mixed bag, but I can overlook the flaws and I do enjoy this. But what did you think of X-Men Apocalypse? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to read what you have to say. And stay tuned for tomorrow. I'll be joined by my buddy Phil from Phil Talk Sports, returning from the Wolverine review to talk about what should have been the final appearance of Wolverine in any capacity for quite some time. It's a little movie called Logan.